like when bad things happen to bad people, you are at least like, okay, like you deserved it at some level. But I didn't even think in the span of anything that I had done, or in the whole book of, if we were to do checks and balances, like there was nothing that I had done in my life that deserved this. My husband is hero, like absolute hero for everybody, because oh my God, he's still married to her. And what a sacrifice he's done by still being married to her. And I've been in so many forums where I have met men with disability who have come with their wives. But not a single person has walked up to the wife and said, oh my God, you're so good to have married a man with a disability. It's a good life. And then at work, get away from meetings that you know are non-productive by using my excuse of my disability.
Hello, this is Zen-Brain, a platform for conversations that we normally don't seem to have. So do check out zenbrain.com. And if you'd like to watch more videos, click on the YouTube icon on our website and you'll be taken to our YouTube channel where you'll find over 100 videos. And now you can also listen to our podcasts on Spotify. Besides chats with experts and researchers, we also have deeply personal conversations. And today it's going to be one of those. In fact, it is with Shalini Saraswathi, someone who I often think about every now and then, ever since we met in 2019. That's why I was so happy that she agreed to chat with me on Zen-Brain. So first of all, thank you very much, Shalini, for being here.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. You almost sounded like an ex-boyfriend thinking about me for very long.
Well, I did say you had a lot of impact on me, and that's a fact. Today we are really talking about uncertainty, of life itself, mental and emotional strength, and self-motivation. And for all those of you who aren't familiar with Shalini's story, let me quickly tell you a little bit about her, and then she can continue. In 2012, when Shalini was 32 years old, she and her husband had gone to Cambodia on a holiday. They found out that she was pregnant. When they came back, a month later, she came down with very high fever and had to be hospitalized. Now, doctors thought it was malaria or dengue, which she was treated for, but it turned out to be a rare bacterial infection, which is Rickettsial with Morts. Now, Shalini lost her baby, endured multiple organ failures, and slipped into a coma. And I'll let Shalini continue with the story. Can you tell us what this bacterial infection really is, and how did you get the infection, first of all?
So for the longest time, the hospital couldn't figure out what bacteria it was, and then they kind of traced where I'd been, etc. And then they kind of, I think, called somebody in Cambodia, and they kind of did the whole symptoms, and that's when they figured that this was a bacteria. So typically, you get this out of tick bites, dog ticks, apparently. So I did pet a lot of dogs while I was in Cambodia. And I just think that maybe I was just unlucky, but maybe because I was already pregnant and I didn't know at that point in time, I was more susceptible to an infection because, my husband kind of petted the same dogs that I did as well. So I just think wrong person in the wrong place kind of thing. But I also met some other doctors much later on who said that this was also prevalent in like the hilly regions of Assam and things like that in India. And usually if you catch it early, it's solvable with like a medicine that costs you like $10 a tablet. So, but so I got the infection and I went in the hospital and then, we went into a coma. And, when I woke up, all my limb extremities, it turned like a dark blue-black. Basically, it's called thrombosis, which basically means that all your blood vessels and all your blood capillaries are clotted. Mm-hmm. And I was told at that point in time that there's a very likely chance that I might have to lose all my limbs. But I think like we didn't as a family think that was the way forward for us. So we didn't think that it was going to happen. It usually happens to somebody else. That's not us. It usually happens to somebody in the newspaper that you read about, right? It's not someone that you know or you do. And And I had a friend who kind of believed in horoscopes at that point in time. So she took my horoscope as well. And the person who saw it said there was no disability viewed in my horoscope. That gave me a lot of confidence as well at that point in time. And we went home and we tried a lot of alternative medications. We almost were like borderline quackery at some point in time, I think. There was medicines on one side, like anybody could say. And I think it talks about a very important thing, right? Like about how when you are at your lowest or where you are your weakest, is where it's so easy for you to get into all of this, right? Like you sometimes, like I know, like when people talk about, how does somebody believe like in these babas or believe in these things, right? And then you hear stories about how they were taken for a ride. And I just believe that when you're so weak, like I remember like we would almost 6 months, every Saturday or Sunday, my husband would go with like 1 kg of ghee and give it in some temple. That's like a ridiculous thing to do. Like if you think about now rationally, right? How would that solve my problem? But I guess that's what it is, right? Like we were hoping that either any of the medication will work or any of the gods would work, right? Like even then, like I had pastors in the house, I had a Maulvi in my house, and then there was all of the temples and there was all of that going on simultaneously at multiple times. In some ways, I also think that, like all the gods kind of just passed the buck around and said that you're going to solve this. And then nobody really took ownership for it, right? So and then we just hope something would work. I met this beautiful doctor in Kerala, Swamiji, and he kind of we started on Ayurveda. I'm being Malayali, I guess we kind of did some of that, and to some extent things kind of started to get better, like the gangrene, because at that point in time I had gangrene in my legs, and that was a tough thing to deal with, because nothing can prepares you to deal with the smell of your own flesh rotting. Like there are no reference points. You don't know how to deal with it. And that was like probably one of the lowest phases I had, right? Like I kind of shut myself down. I shut the world because I didn't want anybody to be near me and be all this stinky person. So the Ayurveda helped to some extent. But I then started to work and I would kind of take my calls from home. So I managed to fracture my first hand. I lost this one. About 6 months later. I mean, this was in March of 2013. So a good year that I was bedridden. Then about 6 months, August 2013, the rest of this fell off. And then we were like, we always wanted to save a hand, right? Because we just thought, like we were like just saying, like, just give us like one hand, we'll deal with the rest of it. It's all right. Because it's more finer. Mm-hmm. Then once the hand went, then we knew there was no point in really waiting, because the legs we always knew were more replaceable, and there were better options there. So then we said, okay, amputation seems like the best way forward for us, and that's that.
So September 2013, you decided to get your feet amputated too. Because through that period, did you have time to even prepare yourself for this eventuality?
Yeah, I did, right? Because I had the 1.5 years to kind of lie in bed and think about nothing else but that. In some ways, I think, it gave me the time and space to become okay with amputation. Because for me at that point in time, it was just so frustrating to be bedridden, to not be able to walk, to not just get out or do any of those things, that I actually looked forward. Like, I think at some point in time, I was just holding on for everybody in the family, right? Because everybody was hoping for a miracle. And we are also hoping for a miracle. And then you just, you're just hanging on, waiting for something to happen. And sometimes I think you just have to make things happen as well. And then so by that time, like I was just like, okay, let's just get rid of this. It at least means I get to wear prosthetics and I at least get to walk. I get to do something instead of just lying in bed or being transported physically, being lifted from one place to another. So in some ways, I also feel like, if like, let's say I'd met with an accident and I'd like immediately lost all of my limbs, etc., I think it would have been a bigger trauma. This kind of gave me the time and this space to think about all of the consequences and think that this was the best decision for me. And surprisingly also, maybe because I had that kind of time, was why I never suffered from phantom pain, right? Because most people that go through amputation typically suffer with phantom pain, which I've been lucky enough not to have.
Mm-hmm. So every time I've talked about you, Shalini, or narrated your story to anyone, the one thing that's really stood out is this whole uncertainty that we were just talking about
Mm,
earlier.
mm,
1 month earlier, you were holidaying, and the next, you were battling for your life, and your life
mm,
changed forever. Did you at
mm.
any point ask yourself, like, why? Why
Of
me?
course. Of course. Like, I just hated anybody with two hands and two legs for too long. Because I was just like, why did I have to get this and why do you get to have both your hands and feet? It just seemed unfair. And like, I'm not a bad person, right? Like, like when bad things happen to bad people, you are at least like, okay, like he deserved it at some level. But I didn't even think in the span of anything that I had done or in the whole book of, if we were to do checks and balances, like there was nothing that I had done in my life that deserved this. Like, but then of course, there were people that said that, maybe something that you did in your past karma and, all of that jazz. But even then, like, I just couldn't understand it at all. Why me? And like, I just felt like it was such a raw deal. Like, you could have at least given me one hand. Like, those are the kind of arguments I was trying to have. Like, dude, you could have just taken the legs and given me just one hand, right? Like, we could have met it like mid space somewhere. Um, yeah, like, for very long, it did. And then I think I read it someplace, right, which said that if you won the lottery, you never ask the question, why me? So when something bad happens, you don't ask that question either. So I just thought that made sense. Like, until that point in time, I've had things that have phenomenally gone well for me in my life. Like, I've done well academically. I've always done well at work. And I've always, like, I've done well. So, at all those points in time, I never turned around and said, why me? I mean, always equal to, yeah, I'm smart and intelligent, blah, 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 kind of shit. But when something bad happens, then, I think you just like in the whole realm of life, I think we get some good hands, we get some bad hands, and some of us get really bad hands. And it is what it is. And you can feel as bad and you can feel terrible and depressed and all of those things about it for however long that you want, but that does not change your situation in any form or fashion, right? The situation still stays the same. So why even bother?
Maybe there was some emotional trauma as well.
I didn't think I was worth living, right? That's like a huge space to kind of get out of, because um, you don't understand why you're living, or even if your life is worth living. And then there's also the bit that, there are always people who have to look after you, putting a lot of pressure on your existing social structure that you have. So you then begin to question all of those things, right? I mean, there was absolutely times that I wanted to kill myself. But like like logistically, I wasn't able to like pull it off, right? Like for me, like I thought through this with so much of detail as well, to say that, like, let's say if I wanted to, like, the options that we have to kill ourselves, like I couldn't get on a stool to kick it off and then get on a fan, right? Or I could, and my slits, my both my wrists were thrombosed, so I can't slit my wrists either. The only way, or I could jump off a building. The only option I had was like to get hold of poison or something like that. But I knew that I needed somebody who was willing to help me for that. And I knew that my existing circle would not do that. So I did think about it in detail as well, because I didn't think my life was worth living at all. Absolutely. And I'm sure that, yeah, like you just go through this whole thing in your head that, like, and there's also this sense of what are you going to do now with your life? Because there's no direction. You don't know if you'll ever work. You don't know if you'll ever go out with your friends. You don't know if you'll ever travel. You don't know if you'll ever accomplish anything in your life. There's just so many variables that are happening, right? And you don't know if you're ever going to do any of that ever at all. So there was just a sense of so much of uncertainty of how life was going to turn up and how anything was going to work out ever at all. So I think dealing with that can take a huge emotion on you. But I think on the plus side, I've had a great support system that's kind of helped me through it. I've had people who kind of taught me that they didn't love me just because I was of who I was physically, right? The fact that they love me irrespective of that. I think those things kind of helped. And then I think I've also been very fortunate that things have just fallen in place for me, and I've grabbed every opportunity that came my way. I was working at a very senior level in my organization when all of this happened. And then when the office called me and said, hey, this is not an old role, but do you want to just recruit some people for us? Which was just like doing like a basic recruiter job. And I didn't think twice. And I just said, yes, I'll do it, because it just gave me something to do. So I just think I just grabbed onto any straw of hope that came my way, or anything that came my way. And then, fortunately, things just worked out for me.
I've never forgotten you talking about not being able to do the most obvious thing, like being able to pick up a glass that we take for granted on a daily basis.
And even worse, and I think the worst thing I hate that I can't do is kill a mosquito. Because, it's the most annoying thing in the world. And then you can see them, but you can't kill them. It's just like, that's like the worst thing, right? And I just think there's so many things, just smaller, finer things in life, right, that you take for granted when you have your hands. Just the power to caress someone, right? Like you just have this small, and I never knew until that's where all of the feelings come from. Like you can touch anybody with a body part like this, but it doesn't feel the same as this. So, it's just those small little things that you miss so much, right? Like just like walking on the sand in the seas, or feeling grass in your feet, or holding hands, holding somebody's hand and pressing your hand together just gives someone so much of comfort. You can't do that. So you just think about those smaller things that you just kind of miss. I miss not being able to do my own hair, because I'm always annoyed somebody does it wrongly for me. So, just those things that frustrate me more than anything else.
Your hair looks super. But Shalini, did you at any time go through depression?
I'm sure I was depressed. I think the doctor, when I came out of the hospital, and I had a psychiatrist at the hospital that put me on antidepressants. So I think I was on antidepressants, I think about the first 2.5 months or so. But I don't think they told me explicitly they were giving me antidepressants. And then afterwards, when we were kind of reconciling what we were having, what we were not having, was when we figured that it was an antidepressant. And I said, I'd get off it. Maybe those tablets helped me at that point in time. I'm not sure. But after that, I haven't been on it. Mm-hmm. I have my bouts of, I don't know if I'm going to call it depression or anything. I have my bouts of sadness, and where everything just comes back to me and it overwhelms me, and I feel awful and terrible, and I go through the why me, and I've had such a raw deal, and it's so tough and it's so difficult, and I don't understand why I deserve it. And I have those bouts, but I think I've reached a state today where I give myself like 3 days to kind of mourn about things. And I also have noticed that most of these things happen during PMS, right? So it just kind of like, as it is, you want to kill people during your PMS, but then, all of this just comes at that same point in time. So, I kind of like, I don't know if it's my hormones that's triggering it or not, but I just kind of give myself that time. And sometimes I just don't beat myself about it, saying that I don't have to be upbeat about all the time. And I also have realized that it's okay to be sad about it. It's okay to mourn about it. It's a loss that I have had, and it's not an easy one. And I'm allowed to grieve for it. I'm allowed to feel terrible about it. I don't have to be all positive and wow about everything all the time. Sometimes I think we kind of like want to brush things under the carpet and keep everything too pretty at some point in time as well, right? And I don't think we need to do it. Like sometimes our losses are our losses. And we have the right to feel sad and mournful and angry and all of those emotions about it, right? And then I think being a human is about those emotions. Otherwise, we're dead. Like the only way you can't be stressed or feel sad or depressed is if you're dead. Those are dead people goals.
I love the humor. Thank you for that. And I love that you said it's okay to wallow in those emotions. Sometimes they may be negative. Sometimes they may be feelings of deep sadness.
Yes.
to go through it.
But but the point is you have to figure out whether you're able to get out of it on your own. And if not, then you have to seek help, right? That's like a very important thing. I don't think you want to like wallow in it like for like a whole year, because then that's an issue, right? Like for me, like my standard rule today is you get 3 days and then you pick yourself up on the 4th day, right? And then sometimes like grace period may like 5 days happens. But then after that, that's my max. Then I know that I can't go beyond that. But I feel like, I also feel that if there is someone out there who's going through it repeatedly over longer periods in time, then it's all right to you to seek a therapist or figure out that you need help. And that's perfectly all right.
Absolutely. And you've always maintained that your husband and your family have played an integral role in your recovery.
Absolutely.
What had been your expectations?
My expectation was that they would go to the Himalayas and find like this magic, whatever it is, and they would come down and then I would just be fine, right? Like that was the expectation. I just think when you're going through your trauma and what you're going through, and to be fair, the everybody in that support group is going through their own trauma of having seen me go through what it is. So I think expecting anything from anyone, I think is not the ask at all. I think what we consciously or subconsciously or even very unconsciously did was, I think I always said that I'll have to be, have to deal with this well and have to be strong about this. And I think they also, like nobody ever cried in front of me. Everybody cried separately. So I just think that we kind of played off that and we kind of were strong for each other. They just did so much more than what anybody could ask for.
Each one of them were going through their own trauma of seeing you undergo your trauma. And that's very important even for caregivers to understand that they have been deeply affected. And sometimes those caregivers may need help.
Absolutely.
But the other thing is, most caregivers also don't know how much to give. What are the expectations from the person who's going through this, like yourself, for instance? So that was, really my reason for asking you this question. Of course, there was this physical support, but what kind of emotional support did you expect? Say from your sister, for instance.
I think they gave me my space to kind of moan and be okay with it, right? Like I remember like there used to be days when I would cry from morning to like evening, or like I would just cry. Like I would be in bed and I would be like moaning like the cow till the cows come home. And I remember that they would just let me do that. There wasn't like, oh, don't cry, or like there was never that, oh, everything was going to be okay and all of that, right? I think the language was always that no matter what comes, we will deal with it together. And I think that was good, right? Like, because you're not giving me false hopes. You're not telling me that there is this magic thing that's going to happen to me. So I think that kind of helped for the person that I am. But I also think, Shruti, that it could differ from person to person. I am a person that is a sum of a function of the way I was raised, about the people that I have met, and how I was brought up, and by the people that I hang out with, right? So the way I deal with it might be completely different to the way that you would deal with a traumatic incident, and which is probably why you would find that, people can go through different kinds of trauma, and there are people that emerge differently out of it, right? Like there are people that go through, for example, sexual violence young, and then, when they grow up, they become the perpetrators of that. And then there are people that go through that trauma, but, emerge and become extremely successful out of it. There are people that go through the same thing and go through depression. So for me, being left alone and just allowing to moan and feel terrible about it was something that I wanted. But maybe somebody else would have wanted, to not let that happen.
But this perseverance, this self-motivation, obviously is something that, you were brought up with, right?
Amma is very feminist. she has these very radical views sometimes, I think. Like when she sees these rapists in the paper and all, she'll just be like, let's just shoot the shit out of them, right? Like, so I remember Amma, while we were being raised, had constantly had this with us to say that you will always stand on your 2 feet and you will never ask a man for money. And maybe that's from her experience, right? Because she was always a homemaker and she always had to ask money from my father. I think you're being South Indian also is that you were always you had to excel at studies, you had to do well. And those are things that you're brought up with. But on the other side, I was also given a lot of freedom. I grew up in the defense colony, so I always had more men friends than women friends. I would be the only girl child sitting with about a bunch of 15 to 20 guys. I think that kind of being brought up with that kind of trust, I just think it brings you up and you see yourself very differently. So I think I was. And then I think also DNA wise, like the natural predisposition is to be a cheerful person. I've never been sad and mournful for too long in my life. So I just think all of those things just worked in my favor for me.
And then you started putting on weight and you started going to the gym, right? And while the trainers wanted to help, they weren't sure how to do this, right?
Yeah, like
then you found your coach. Tell us about that.
So I was like terrible. I felt so awful because, none of my clothes would fit me. And I was like, and then, I'd also like lost all my limbs. I had like, because I was bedridden, I'd cut off my hair. So when I looked in the mirror, I had no semblance to whom I looked like in the past. And then all of this was like a lot of ugliness to deal with. And then you're wearing your prosthetics, you walk like one duck. And then there's the weight, and my clothes don't sit like how they used to sit. So I think I went through more depression at that point in time than anything else, and the clothes didn't fit me, right? Then I went to a couple of gyms, and the poor guys at the gyms, like, they had no reference point themselves, right? They can't give me dumbbells, they can't make me sit in a cycle. I think it scared the crap out of a couple of trainers. And then I met my coach. Like, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and a friend of mine had just gone through a knee replacement surgery, and he said, what, hey, I'm going to this coach, like, why don't you just meet him? So we met my coach. So we were going to the bank. We met this friend who's a cop. So then we went out to eat biryani. And then that was when this conversation happened. And then he said, what, he's going to be right here in Cubbon Park. Do you want to like meet him? So we called him. It all just happened, right? And then we met coach. And then coach like meets me and he's like, oh, no hands, no legs. And like he was like, and then like later I know that he was so traumatized by it, but he kept like a whole poker face when he met me. And then he said that, listen, I've never worked with anybody like you, and I only work with elite athletes, but just come along. We'll see what we can do. So I just felt like that was a good attitude to have, right? Like and he maintained a great face, but he went back home and he was completely traumatized by it. At that point in time, like, I wasn't thinking I'm going to run and all of that. Just like I was just like, let's lose weight, let's fit into clothes, we need to look pretty. End of story. For the first 1 year, I think I only walked. And, the man would just push me to kind of do it in a better time, cover more distance and stuff like that. And we did a lot of exercises and stuff like that. So I just like, I just felt better that I could do some of the things that I couldn't do before, like walk without help, climb up the stairs, or sit in a chair and get off the chair. Small things in life. And I was happy with just those. And then about later after that was when in the legs that I didn't have blades at that point in time. In the normal legs, I figured that I could run, and we were very excited. And coach also was like, oh, come on, let's run. And that was how we kind of like ran and kind of got into that. And then coach came up with the idea that we should run the TCS. And I just thought like the man had lost it completely. Like, what? Like, I didn't run when I was able-bodied. Like, what? And then I went away, like, correctly during that time, I went away on a holiday to the US. When I came back, he said, sure, we'll do 10 kilometers next. First it was 5, then he said, we'll do 10. But I honestly thought like there was going to be at some point, like, I played along, but like, I played along with it, and I was just hoping like, or I just felt like there was going to be at some point where he's going to figure that it's an impossible task. And then he's going to say, Shad, like, it's fine, we don't need to do this. And then we did, and then we trained, and I think somewhere along the line, I think it became somewhere about taking that control back of my body, right? Like when I wasn't even destined to walk, and then to be able to run, for me somehow felt like I was taking that power that the universe took away from me. The way to say the universe, like, take that control back. It's my life. So I think somewhere along the line it became about that, and there was just some joy about not being designed to not do anything, and then to be able to push and be able to accomplish that, right? Like, just made me feel great. Then one day he called me to the stadium on a Saturday and he said, we'll try it today. 25 laps around the stadium. I remember getting to like 16, 17, and then I'm like, listen, no petrol. Let's just stop. But he wouldn't let go. And he said, no, we'll walk, we'll run, we'll finish it. But I hated it. Like, I finished it and my legs were terrible. I was feeling so physically, I was feeling terrible, but I liked how I felt. I liked the person that I was after the run. And then that's how then we said, okay, once I did that, then I was like, okay, I can do this. It's not so bad. And funnily, at the same point in time, Autobot called me up and said, hey, we've got this blade in here. We're looking for someone to try it. Do you want to try it? I said, sure. And like until that point in time, they were unsure about giving it to me because they always fitted single leg amputees. And all the single leg amputees have fallen. And then they were thinking like, iska do haath nahi hai, tu pair nahi hai. What are we going to do? Because I can't break my fall either. And that's how then we fitted it. And then the blades just came conveniently in time for the TCS run. And the rest is history.
Absolutely. But I love how you said it was a way to bring back control, and it was a way to control your body.
Like you said, like I couldn't drink a glass of water, but here I was running 10 kilometers. That's just like, I'm just like, yeah, like with power.
So you completed the 10K marathon, not once, but twice, right? 2 years.
Twice, yeah. The first year I did an awful job and I did it in like 2 hours. And then I said like, it was shit and I had to redo it again. So we ran the next time and did it in an hour and 35 because we were always gunning for the 1.5 hours. Yeah.
And you still continue to train every day. I often see your workouts on Instagram.
Are you following me? Are you a follower?
Of course I do.
Good. Well done. There was a time where I was to ask you, are you following me? Just follow me. I don't have enough count. And then when I used to go for my talk,
everybody watching this, please follow her Instagram page. We have it right here for you. Now, getting back to your workouts, which I'm an ardent fan and follower of. What does it do for you?
So now I'm a 100-meter sprinter. So I've moved away from the long distance. I thought it was going to be easier to do 100 meters instead of the 10. But I didn't realize what I was getting myself into.
There's speed involved here, right?
Yeah, there's speed. And it's a lot of work. Like, nobody tells you that, right? Like, I ran. Now I run. I mean, the first time I ran in 2019, the first time at the nationals. I came in at a bronze. Then I've done the nationals pretty much every single year other than the COVID year, I think. And we've always placed either silver. Once a silver, once a gold, but everything else was a silver. Now the thing with the whole Indian space is that I don't run with any other blade runner because there are no other blade runners. So I'm running with women with congenital deformities in the leg. So that's the space that I've been running in, and then participated a few places. My workouts, there's one part which is the running part, but then there's also like strength and conditioning, right? Again, the problem that I have with the stadium. So in the stadium we do have like a little gym and stuff like that, but it's not adapted for me. And that's when I felt like I needed to do something that was specifically designed for me. And that's how then I go to Peak Performance. And I work with Dipali Pandey. She's my physio, and then she's also helped me kind of design workouts. So one of the things that we've been doing is we've been stalking a lot of these other people online who run on blades, and we see what their workouts are, and then we kind of adapt it, and we kind of think of, because a lot of I think the problem also is for everybody that I'm working with who's helping me become better and get into the race. I am the first person with a disability they're working with. So it's for them also a lot of homework, because there are no reference points. Like, I don't have a calf, so I don't need to strengthen my calf. But then a lot of the exercises are designed for that. So, they have to really think about what muscle is being used when you're a blade runner, and then work very differently for that. So little of content online that, we had so little to go on for. And that was why then we said, okay, and I had it in my head that I'm going to put this out there, because if there's somebody else with a disability out there, they probably don't have to search as much as I probably did, that it's going to be easier for them to kind of see and give them that there is a world of possibilities, right? Like losing your hands and legs does not mean that you cannot exercise, that you cannot get into fitness, or that there are so many things that you cannot do. And maybe that was the intent of putting things out into the Instagram page.
And that is our intent today, to put this interview out to all the people who watch or would like to watch this, that they are inspired and they always know that it's not the end of the road. It's not the end of the world. Look at what you've done and look at the example that you've set. Really, it's commendable.
I just feel like we have such a bad infrastructure and we have such bad facilities for people with disabilities that even if you do the bare minimum and become successful, that people find it inspiring. But in an ideal world, if we had all of the infrastructure, or we had a world that allowed us to prosper and to live a life, I think there would be so many Shalinis today in the world. And I would be in the bottom of that list. Our expectations of people with disabilities are so less sometimes.
Is that something that you want to advocate? And if so, what would be some of the changes that you want to see brought about, and how are you pushing for those?
I just think the schools needs to change. We need integrated schools. We need schools where, children that don't have disabilities go with children with disabilities. We need to have more teachers that are people with disabilities. But there's just so much going wrong at the instant stage, right? Like I feel today that if I am successful today is purely because of the fact that I was able-bodied for the first 30 years of my life. I went to a normal school. I went to a normal college. I had access to schools and education that molded me to become a confident person. But if I was born with a disability, I wouldn't have had those opportunities. I don't think I would have had the same level of confidence. And I see that so differently when I go for the para games today, right? At a national level, most of the children that come there come with a congenital deformity. And the way that they function versus the way I function is completely different. And which is sad. I met this girl who has a leg issue. She's from Himachal. Family बोलता है कि क्या दौड़ना whatever, like वो तो शादी करवा देंगे. So the only time is she takes the cows to the hills and that's when she runs. Right, that's her only opportunity to do it. And then she says, आप तो Bangalore में ना, तो आपको like तो बहुत अच्छा होगा. Like you get a chance to train, you have a coach. And it just made me think that, and remember that she ran just in the hills, whatever, and she still came third. Right? So imagine if she had all of what I have today, she would be doing phenomenally well for herself. So I just think there's just so much to change today. Like, even with, and I even think like the people with disabilities as well, like, we'll have to get out. We have to be in people's faces. We have to say, hey, this is what we want. And not take what people are giving to us. But there's so much structurally, fundamentally that has to change, that it's a huge ask today, Shruti. Like, I feel it's like a really huge ask, right? Like I went, the Baptist hospital in Bangalore does they have like a rural outreach program that I was part of. And I went in there and they have this school that they've built for children with disabilities. And it's a combination of both, autism, autistic children and all of that. And I met with a lot of parents and I was having this conversation with them. And a lot of the parents, the first thing that they told me was that they live in these little villages. And this is not even rural Bangalore, which means it's just right from the city, it's like 10, 20 kilometers away from the city. And the mother, she was crying and she was talking to me and she said the biggest challenge she has is everybody around her just tells her, why are you wasting your time bringing a child to the school? It's not going to help. Or, there's nothing that you can do with her life. Just keep her in the house and let it be, focus on the other child that you have. And that is so sad. Like, that is the saddest thing to say to a mother who's trying to fix her child's life or try to make her child's life as best as she can. And if that's happening in rural Bangalore, I mean, I don't even want to imagine what's happening in the rest of India, right? I mean, and I'm saying, like, even in the cities, right? Like, I know somebody who, who bought a prosthetic leg. This person was born with a congenital deformity in the leg, and then they put the prosthetic on, and then this person went back to the prosthetic center in like 3 months and said, "Can you take this leg back and give me a refund?" And then when they asked them why, they're saying the family is saying that you're not walking like a normal person, so we wasted our money. We might as well have bought a car with that money. And I am like, are you like serious, right? But that's the world we live in. And so, like, sometimes I feel awfully sad that things are not going to change. But then I've had so many conversations with people with disabilities as well, that, I've had women who walked up to me, and, I remember this girl in Chennai who told me that she was Tamil, and she said, and I spoke about how, women, as women with disabilities, the way we view ourselves is so terrible. And then she came up to me and said, "Akka, now a skirt there." I don't know if you know Tamil, but I then translate. Now a skirt வாங்கியிருந்தேன், ஆனா நான் நினைச்சேன், நான் போட்டானா எல்லாரும் சொல்லுவாங்க, என்ன உனக்கு கால் இல்லாம நீ skirt போடுற, which basically means that she bought a skirt. And then, she thought to herself to say, if I wear the skirt, people are going to say, here you are a person with a disability and you want to wear a skirt and look pretty. Today, after I heard you, I'm going to go back and wear that skirt. So I just think that, and then on the other side, I see and meet people like that it gives me hope that it's not all so bad.
There's a mindset change that is required. And when more and more people such as yourselves and all of us start talking about it, having these conversations, and perhaps there will be more knowledge about it. Because right now, I don't think people who don't go through it themselves, or don't have a family member who's going through it, I think we live in our own, ivory towers, and we don't we're not concerned about topics such as these, issues such as these. But the other thing that you just brought up is also this difference in attitude in India towards women with disabilities versus a man. And I know you and I have talked about it in another forum, but you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely, because as it is, you're Abla Nari, right? And then when something like this happens to you, people don't necessarily see, because I think some ways women's roles are very much defined, right? You're a mother, you're a wife, you're a daughter, you're a daughter-in-law. And the roles that we do revolve a lot around having the house, looking after the house, looking after the people in the house. And then when you're somebody like me that does none of those things right now, right? I'm an awful daughter-in-law. I do nothing. I'm an awful wife. I don't do anything. I'm a terrible daughter. I don't look after my parents. My parents look after me. So with all of that, I don't do any of those functions. So it's very easy for me to question my own worth as a woman, right? Like, I'm not a mother either. So you begin to question whether it's worth being a mother or not, I mean, being a woman or not. And when you kind of derive your value as a person from the roles that you play, and today I don't derive any value from any of those roles. I have to derive value as just me as Shalini. So for me, that journey has been in itself. But the way people view me is like, obviously, like, I've met people who kind of, like, in my husband's village, there was this man, and then, he's going through this whole phase and understanding. The first question he asked me is that, so you don't cook for your husband? And I'm like, dude, I don't eat myself. Why will I cook for my husband? Right? And then I have my Prashant's aunt, who kind of was like then telling this man there that, she works, she earns like very well, she goes to foreign countries, somehow compensating for the fact that, she misses her limbs, but, she's doing all of those things. So obviously there is a view that you're defined by those roles. So when you don't play any of that, you're probably of no value. And then, of course, there is also this whole thing about, so sad, your husband, like, he needs to have. So somebody once asked me if I have a sister, because then, my sister can marry my husband. Then the sister can look after me and look after my husband. It's a very smart recommendation that was given to me. Then I told that man that I don't have a sister, but you have a daughter, because then, your daughter can look after me and marry my husband. And then he was very uncomfortable with that conversation after that. So I just think like, and then it's also the view of how my husband is viewed, right? Like my husband is hero, like absolute hero for everybody, because oh my God, he's still married to her. And what a sacrifice he's done by still being married to her. And I've been in so many forums where I have met men with disability who have come with their wives. But not a single person has walked up to the wife and said, "Oh my God, you're so good to have married a husband, a man with a disability." But on the other side, my husband is getting these kudos. She said, "Oh my God, you're such a man, you're such a..." And it's just the worldview, because as a woman, if the roles were switched, it would have been my dharma to look after my husband. But if it's the roles are switched, somebody needs to look after my husband because he's the poor thing, and so it that worldview is very skewed. It comes from a place of patriarchy, obviously. Like, and it's the same thing. Like even when women become widowed versus men become widowed, right? Like when women get widowed, she's upshakun and all of those things, and she's shunned away from the world. But when a man is widowed, they're like, "Oh my God, who's going to look after the man? And let's get him married." So I just think it's nonsense, but it is the way it is.
But I'm glad you're talking about it. It's a mindset change, absolute mindset change that we require. And of course, it all stems from patriarchy, something that, by the way, even women add to a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no, I think, in my case, I've just had a lot of like, the women going like, "Oh, who feeds you, who looks after you, oh, your husband is still there with you, oh, then he's also a very nice man, very nice, you're very lucky that way." I think it comes, but I've never had a woman who's tell me to get my husband married and all as yet. It's mostly been a man who's done that to me so far, so it's all right.
How does your husband react to all this?
The man is scared that I will kill him if he does anything like that. No, I think he just, Prashant has this standard. Like, he will just smile and say, no, she's the one. She's the strong one. And then I'm just like, he just knows that I'm just rolling my eyes there. You're like, whatever. And then he's been in conversations where I've spoken about this, right? Like how much he gets versus, how it's, where he gets the accolades that, he's done a good job, and let's not, and while he's done a great job supporting me, and likewise has my entire family and my support system, but I don't see why he needs to get unfair credit. Like my mom wouldn't get that kind of accolades, right? And I feel like my mom's done so much more than him.
Well, I know your family, friends, and husband know you to be this extremely positive person, but is positivity enough, Shalini? How do you remain mentally and emotionally strong through all of this?
I think the underlying thing mantra that you have to use is that you're going to be fine, right? It's something that I've constantly told myself through all of the time, and the self-talk that you have with yourself is so important, right? That it's going to be fine, we're going to get through this, and it's like, my thing is, I'm strong, I'm beautiful, I've got my life in control. So I just think that constantly having to tell yourself that you're going to be fine, and I think for me it was that no matter what happens, right, I'm going to live my life well. I'm going to do well. That was something that I had before as well, pre-disability, that no matter what, I will do well with my life. And I think that's something that I've continued to do, that I will do well, whether if it's the sports that I've gotten into, or the speaking engagements that I do today, or with work that I do today, that's just a constant thing that I want to do well. And for me today, having come so close to death and having gone through so much, I just feel sometimes that I've also realized the whole stress that we go through with life is so insignificant in the whole scheme of things, that the universe is there, right? And we're just gonna die anyways. So what are we going on about? So I just feel today, the only thing I ask myself is that, have you lived well today? Like, have you done everything that you could do today? And maybe, and if you want to do something, I think consistency is very important. You have to be at it every single day. And then I think I'm also lucky.
By the way, you've stolen my lines. I am the one who keeps telling everyone, one day we are going to die anyway. Are you going to regret eating this or drinking that? No, but
Yeah.
Shalini, what would some of the things that you feel are really positive, or what has happened for the best today probably would not have happened had you not faced what you had?
I don't think I would have run. I don't think I would have run for the country. I don't think I would be doing talks where people pay money to listen to me. I don't think I would have stayed in the amount of 5-star hotels that I have and live in suites and order desserts that I don't even know how to pronounce. I don't think I would have gotten through airport security so fast. And I don't think I would have just had the random kindness that I have from people today, right? Like, I think the disability is overwhelming for a lot of people, and by default, they're treating me well. So I just think it's a good life. And then at work, this is going online, right? I don't know if I should say this now.
Be careful.
Okay, but
Careful with
so
what
like,
you say.
no, I'm just saying, like, I could be like, get away from meetings that are non-productive by using my excuse of my disability, right? Or just say, oh, my leg's feeling terrible. I don't think I can sit and just go off, right? So I just think it's given me, and I'm going to say unproductive meetings, okay? Productive meetings I'm part of. So I just think it just it's great that I just feel like there's just so many things that have worked, and I feel like I also have become a nicer person, I feel, post my disability, because I just feel that you're naturally becoming a lot more empathetic to other people because you've gone through it. You come from a place of kindness always, because you're always thinking that you don't know what shit that other person is going through. So it just you naturally are going in there. Like, so even if the worst thing happens to me, I'll be thinking from that person's perspective and seeing that, maybe he's having a bad day. Maybe, he had a traumatic childhood. I don't know, but it just makes me, I feel like it's made me a nicer person than I was in the past.
One last thing before we let you go. Any life mantras that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, like, don't read these self-help books, because I think they're a waste of time and money. I think you should read fiction, because people don't read enough fiction, and I think that's like the best things to do, because it helps you escape, it helps you get into the world of possibilities, and it just takes your creative mind, right? Because if you're looking for self-help and you want help and you're reading that book, I can tell you that it can help you only to some extent, because finally, if you have to do something, it has to come from here. A book can only motivate you, or anybody, like even you reading this or seeing this online, will motivate you for the next one day, for the next 1 week. If you have to make a change and change your life or do whatever that you want to do, that motivation has to come from within. Nothing else works. And then be happy. Like, don't stress about the small stuff, and just do whatever you want to do.
This is the first time ever in the years that I've run Zen-Brain that somebody has said their life mantra would be to read fiction. So it's certainly something I will not forget. But overall, my big takeaway was always having a positive attitude, of course, towards life. Like you said, being happy and grateful every day for the little things that we take for granted, because what happened to you could happen to anyone, and only mental strength, determination, and a positive attitude and a great sense of humor will
very important to laugh at yourself.
Yes, which thankfully you retain. It was transformational meeting you, and today having this chat, it's once again reiterated why a positive attitude, why self-motivation is important, and why perhaps I need to get back to fiction, maybe?
Yes. Very important. Very, very. Read Friedrich Backman. Very nice.
I shall consider that, although I'm a non-fiction reader, but
I refuse to be interviewed by somebody who doesn't read fiction.
I don't enjoy fantasy at all.
I can't read, like, I've never read Harry Potter and one of those. I happened to read Game of Thrones first before the book came out, and I didn't rewatch the series for very long because I was upset with that man that he refused to write the book. and bring it to closure and then made a series and closure on the series. I thought that was just appalling behavior for a writer. And I didn't read it. Like, I read those books when I was sick. That was 2012. And I did not watch the Game of Thrones series until this year, a good 10 years later, because it was punishment to the writer. But I don't think he knew about it. But in my mind, I thought I gave him a 10-year punishment.
But I hope they lived up to your expectations, because they certainly lived up to mine.
I loved it. I think I quite liked it.
At least we are ending on something that we both agree on. Game of
Yes.
Thrones. Hey, Shalini,
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you for
Pleasure.
joining us on Zen-Brain. I know it's going
Thank
to be an inspiring discussion that people will take away lots from. And we are here to support you in your advocacy for people with disabilities. And we are right there anytime you need us. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was extremely nice and I thoroughly enjoyed myself.